welcome to the first episode of In Layman's Term with Guy Nohra. I am Guy Nohra. We take subjects that are complex and we make them easy to understand for lay people. And today, my first guest is Nancy Shenker. I think she's a very impressive woman who's has had a great career so far, and now she's actually focusing on doing podcasts as well and creating a brand. So I'm going to let her tell you about herself, and then we're going to have an hour or so of just good back and forth. Welcome to In Layman's Terms with Guy Nohra. I'm Guy Nohra, and the issue we're going to discuss what are actually complex issues out there in the real world, but that there are issues that I'm very, very familiar with, and we're going to do it in a way so that we make it less wonkish, less inside the beltway for our listeners. We're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about economy. We're going to talk about venture capital, life sciences, the Middle East, again, all these areas I know very well, and of course, life in general. So today, our guest is in the life in general category. I think she's a badass woman, big time successes from college graduation until today. The thing that I really enjoy is the diversity of her background, and of course where she is today and what she's doing today, which I think is really relevant to some of the things we'll be talking about. So I'm going to let Nancy Shenker introduce herself. And Nancy, for me, it's just a matter of your background, where you got to today, why you're doing what you're doing today. And once we get to that, I will start asking you more questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me on the show, Guy. And it's funny, when you were doing your intro, I was thinking about how my life has not only touched on some of the lifestyle stuff, but also very much on economics and tech. So not to go through the entire exhaustive story of my life, but I was part of that first generation of women who entered the workforce, were told that we should have big jobs and as well as families. And it was also the advent of the technology era. So I did all of the things. I was an executive at Citibank, an executive at MasterCard, and I finally achieved what I thought I was supposed to want in the 1980s, and ended up in the C-suite of the world's largest conference organizer. And then, having checked all of those boxes, along with having 2 kids and all of the yuppie stuff that I was supposed to want in the 80s, I became a founder of my own company at the age of 48. Started a marketing consulting company called The On Switch. And then I started to realize, and again, partially based on my corporate background, that the future was not necessarily working for big companies. So I was ahead of my time starting my own business, and then pivoted into content creation about 10 years ago, which used to be called writing or making content. And then the last chapter of the story was, I realized that we women of the 80s were kind of confused about what the next move should be. As I said, 2 kids, C-level title, founder, what now? And I decided that I really wanted to be an inspiration for other women of my age. I'm 69 years old and proud to admit it. I've seen a lot of things since the 1970s, politically, economically, technologically. And so I started a new brand called Nancy AF. And the F stands for many things, including frank and fact-based and flawed, and want to be an inspiration, will be an inspiration to women my age, that life is not over, and it's not all about menopause and depends and all the rest of the stuff that companies are marketing to us, but that it's never too late to reboot, reinvent, and reposition yourself. And I've got at least 30 great years left. So I have my own podcast. I write about lifestyle, about sex, tech, and life after 50. And I'm finding that my fans are not only people my age who want to remain relevant, but also younger men and women who think that life ends at 45.
Yeah, so it's fascinating to me. And when we first spoke about this evolution where, you get to be a certain age and society in general, wants to put you in a certain category. And, baby boomers, we don't play the game that way. We're gonna try to, live forever and stay around forever. So I think there's a huge opportunity. So this is where my VC instincts came in when we spoke. My VC instincts were, this is a huge untapped market of people who are trying to figure out what to do in this next step of their lives. They've been incredibly successful. They have sometimes, of course, children, but also grandchildren. And that doesn't mean life is over. And so I love the topic. I love the issue. I like hearing that younger people are also paying attention, which I think is also really good. The thing about this segment, and you told me this, was that we, this generation, we have a lot of disposable income. So can you tell me more about the disposable income part so that we can address the business opportunity here?
Absolutely. So, first of all, there's 60 million of us over the age of 50. Many of us did grow up in the tech era, so we're not technologically challenged. There's a huge category called age tech, which is all about developing products and services. And you just mentioned your healthcare background. We are starting to biohack ourselves so we could live longer, healthier lives. And we control 70% of the disposable income in the US right now, about $8 trillion. And what's really sad is that a lot of brands and media companies aren't seeing that opportunity. 8 trillion is not a small number. So, it would take a lot of marketing of sneakers and Cheetos and White Claw to ever get to that number. So marketers uh, um,
Well,
should not ignore us as a very, very profitable segment. And creators need to look at what kinds of products an aging population is going to need. And I'm not talking about walkers and walk-in showers,
yeah.
but even from a healthcare standpoint, solutions that will just help us stay clearer. And I feel better than I have throughout my life. As I said, again, I'm 69 years old and I have more energy, more drive, more clarity than I did 20 years ago. And I do think that's a function of lifestyle, habits, energy level, and curiosity, just seeing what's new and what's next that will make my life better.
So my conclusion, and tell me if I'm correct, is that, and again, I'm coming at it from a business perspective, venture capitalist, the big companies that are going to ignore this segment of the population are doing it at their own peril, at their own loss, because, and again, it's not just walkers and canes, it's everything else. So hopefully, as part of the work that you're doing, people will start paying, corporations will start paying attention to our segment of the population and pay attention to what shows we watch and where we spend our time and of course how to spend our money because that's the most important thing. And as you mentioned to me earlier, we're buying things for our children and grandchildren.
Oh, yeah. So it's a triple spend. So every dollar we spend theoretically is $3 because we're constantly getting those pop-ups on Facebook, buy baby clothes or buy a trip to Disney. And when I look at what I spent on my family in the last 12 months, it's probably as much, if not more, than I spent on them when they were little kids, because I'm now not only buying for them, but I'm buying for my grandkids as well. And, um, I just got my phone bill. I pay on Verizon, I pay for both my daughter's phones just because I try to be a good mom and make up for all the time that I
I
was
do the
commuting
same.
and not spending with them in the
I don't know
80s.
why I do
And
the
then
same.
I pay for a gizmo for my granddaughter so she could be safe when she comes home from school. So yeah, it's a triple threat, as I call it, or triple opportunity.
Yeah, and again, I mean, the message here, I think, for me is that corporate America should pay attention and pay the proper attention. We're not all in these special facilities for old people, you know. playing shuffleball or whatever that game is called. So, okay, so I'm going to switch now. I'm going to switch to your podcasts and some of them. So, tell us the range of the podcasts you've done, and I want you to tell me which one was the most, well, the two top most interesting to you, and then the two top most interesting to your audience.
Oh, absolutely. So the name of the podcast is Age Blind, and I focus on commonalities on sex, life, and tech across generations. So my guests have ranged in age from 21, 22, all the way up to 80s. And we talk about things that we all have in common: food, film, politics to some degree, lifestyle, and spanning the generations. So one of my most controversial topics was about divorce, which now impacts at least 50% of the population. And I had a matrimonial attorney on who happens to be a close friend of mine, and she talked about Melania Trump's prenup, and it blew up. We had 3,000 trolls within a half an hour who didn't even listen to the episode. They were commenting on Helene's appearance and politics. And so I realized that, we all know that's classic clickbait. If something's controversial, it didn't even matter that we weren't talking about politics, just the mere fact that we used the word
Yeah.
Trump,
Yeah.
it blew up. I also really and so that was, I would say, was my most popular episode, just because it
And
generated the most engagement.
just out of curiosity, again, we don't want to do politics here, but just out of curiosity, what was the balance between pro and con uh, with regards to you saying, oh, she has a prenup, and so many people said it's none of our business, and how many people said, of course she's got to have a prenup, who wouldn't in this situation? So how did that play
Well,
out?
it was funny because a lot of the discussion, and this is something you have to be prepared for, when you're our age and you get into this side of the business, once you become a media pundit, for lack of a better term, it's going to be a powder keg. It almost doesn't matter what it is you're saying. The gist of what she was saying was, if you're with a spouse and they start either making money or making mistakes, you need to renegotiate your prenup. If you marry somebody and their net worth is $2 million and they're a founder of a tech company and all of a sudden their net worth skyrockets to $1 billion, do you go back in and renegotiate? Or conversely, if your spouse is having an affair or behaving badly or doing something that you don't really want them to do, can you say, all right, I'll do what you want me to do, but here's my buyout fee? So sadly, it takes what was at one point a romantic union and it turns it into a business deal, and again, not to get political, but, I did think about Cheryl Hines giving up her cosmetic business. Did that actually cost her? Was the business not making any money anyway, so it wasn't a big loss? And I often think about that. If someone came around and said, you need to give up your podcast, you need to give up your media company because of whatever political reason or business reason, yeah, I might do it, but what would the quid pro quo be? And I know that sounds very unromantic and very transactional, but the sad reality is, if divorce is 50% of the married population, there's going to be some element of it that becomes a business transaction, for better or worse.
There's a famous lawyer. I think maybe you've heard of him. He has a YouTube channel. His last name is Sexton, and he was like the divorce attorney to the upper elite in New York, and he actually touches upon a lot of things that you just said, and he exactly the word that you said, which is, how romantic is it 20 years into a marriage to renegotiate a prenup?
Oh, it's awful. As someone who's actually personally gone through it, it's not what I had in mind when I walked down the aisle at the Pierre in that expensive white dress with everybody sitting around. And, it didn't get lost on me. We're like, well, wait a second. How did this romantic thing from my 20s suddenly turn into a contractual thing? So, back to your original question. So that was my powder keg episode. And then one
Okay.
of the things that I truly love about podcasting and writing is I really do believe that one of the things that's going to keep us living active lives until 100 is curiosity. And so I've had guests on my show who've just talked about such fascinating things relating to health and wellness, like erectile dysfunction or hormone replacement therapy or the medical impact of cannabis. So every time I record an episode, I learn a little something about something I knew nothing about. I've had on a counselor who specializes in ethically non-monogamous couples. I mean, I personally like all my sexual episodes because they also get people won't necessarily admit it. People will say, "Oh, I listened to your podcast." So I'm like the erectile dysfunction episode, and they suddenly like turn bright red and say, "Oh, I listened to a lot of them." But we do cover intellectual topics like film and books and new products and technology. But, sex, at the end of the day, sex sells. But
Always.
I don't try to do gratuitous sex. I really focus on sex ed, like sex ed
Right.
for the modern elder, as Chip uh, Connolly calls
Well,
us.
it makes a lot of sense, So for me, you say E&M, and I'm like, I thought that was a personality trait that you take a test for. Uh,
Right. Or a band.
now, yeah, now it's like, oh no, it stands for ethical non-monogamy, and I'm like, okay, so as a someone who's a liberal arts major and someone who speaks fairly good English, I'm like ethical non-monogamy. There's some dissonance in my mind when I hear this, and I'm trying to say, why not just call it what it is? As you're messing around on the side, right? But
But
I
it's
think.
not on the side, and that's where this next generation is like, all right, we don't want to engage in cheating, we're going to put it all out there. This is sexuality transparency. So that's been great for me because in our day we talked about this stuff in whispered tones, and now so much of it is in mainstream media. As you may know, I'm a reality TV watcher. It's how I relax at the end of the day. Instead of, scotch and a cigar, I like turn on 90 Day Fiance. And there are a couple of couples on this season. One is in a throuple, three people in a relationship. And there's
New word for
another
me.
couple, excuse me?
New word for me. Thruple.
Throuple,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I have published glossaries of terms, and they tend to be among my most popular articles and segments because people are afraid to ask because they don't want to seem stupid and they haven't discovered Urban Dictionary yet. And it was funny because my video guy recently said, "I need you to create some BTS footage," and I'm like, "What, BDSM footage?" Which is bondage, and it was like he wanted me to create behind the scenes footage. So there's like a whole lexicon around technology that I've had to learn. I wrote a book about AI back in 2017, so I saw that coming. So I understand my technical glossary, but my sexual glossary, I think over the last 12 months, I've really built up my knowledge in that area. I probably could go on the speaking tour teaching people 50 and older all of the new age terms about love styles, sex styles, lifestyles.
I mean, what we're trying to do, and what you're trying to do is to tell the 50 plus people that it's not over. And if it's not over, they need to be equipped with whatever knowledge that exists, so that they can continue to thrive. Actually, we want people to thrive in this world of ours and do as good as they can because, as you said, they're probably healthy. They're taking care of themselves. They're exercising. I think HRT is a big deal. I recommend to every person that I know, both male and female, that go to if your doctor's not gonna want to talk about this, then go to a naturopath or go to a longevity clinic, or and discuss hormone replacement therapy because it's crucial to just keep yourself in that zone where you can exercise, enjoy your life, not become sedentary, and really you don't get pleasure. So I'm glad again.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah,
so
go.
hormone replacement therapy, great for men and women. And then I, recently went to my endocrinologist and they put me on a new diet that is very, very protein rich. So I think that we're just starting to discover what it takes chemically or naturally to keep the human body healthy and vibrant up to 100, which many of us are going to live to that age. And I certainly would like to. My grandmother lived to 99, my mother lived to 95, and that was out the benefit of all of these health innovations and technologies. And the other thing I want to point out, Guy, is that only 6% of people who work at ad agencies are over the age of 45. So it's not just the product developers, it's also the people who are then taking those products to market. And I see examples of that every day where companies are targeting their products exclusively to young people because they think that that will somehow make them cool. But the reality is, back to that $8 trillion in spending power. I am at the bar and restaurant show right now, and there are all this whole new category of mocktails, of things that taste like alcohol but don't destroy your body over time. But a lot of the marketing is targeted at younger populations, whereas I think they're missing a huge opportunity because I don't drink nearly as much as I used to. And if I go out with friends, I'm just as likely to order a 5% spiked seltzer as I am to order a dirty martini. And so ad agencies need to look at every product, consumer packaged goods, and say, all right, we'll target it to this generation, and then we'll also target it to the 50 plus, and it won't necessarily give the product cooties if we're targeting it to the older population. I think that's the fear. If, a fashion brand shows models over the age of 50, I think they're terrified that young people are going to see an older woman wearing that item and say, well, I'm not going to buy it because my grandmother's wearing it. But I have found actually that it's mostly young women that stop me on the trade show floor and go, where did you get your pants? Where did you get your sneakers? So I've become a walking billboard for a couple of popular brands. But what's interesting is that I've applied to some of those brands as an influencer, and they don't take me into their influencer base because they're looking purely at the numbers. They're like, oh, well, she doesn't have 1 million followers, but I might have 50,000 followers who spend $250,000 a year on clothes and makeup. So marketing 101, which is where I began my career, who's buying your product
Yeah, so
and sell
no,
them more of what they're buying.
it I think we've definitely, if people take one thing out of this, if you're out there listening and you're an entrepreneur, start paying attention to that segment of the population. There's a lot of money to be made, and if you're an existing company and you're a brand, don't ignore that segment. It's actually a really really important one. And again, as a venture capitalist, I'm like, this is an opportunity. This is like a huge huge possibility, and it's something. Heck, if they don't do it, I will. It's kind of how I'm thinking. So. Uh, Tell me about you did the nutrition. You talked a little bit about your protein and so on. Have you done a show on nutrition yet for
Um,
our generation?
I'm doing one on body image, so I think we'll probably touch on nutrition in that one. I also I mean, I always liked lifting weights, but I've kind of amped up my weightlifting when I went for my bone scan and they told me I had osteopenia and osteoporosis in one of my wrists. I'm like, all right, I'm going to fix that. You don't have to give me calcium. I'll up the calcium in my diet through natural foods,
Yeah.
and I'll weight train twice a week. So, I use the term biohacking before. I really do think that, every person over 45 and really starting younger, has an opportunity to biohack themselves. And what works for one person may not work for another. But, and nothing against, the weight loss drugs, but, I wanted to prove to myself that I could get in better shape without the use of chemicals. And I've actually reduced my body size by 16 inches in all the right places since the end of last year, just by weight training, changing out my diet, hormone replacement therapy,
Okay, so
regular cardio.
for a guy who doesn't know all the right places, can you tell us so that we know where the 16
What are
inches?
the right places?
Yeah, I
Thighs,
know for me it's my back.
booty. Yeah. So belly fat, that is a big issue for people over 50. That is where the fat cells tend to congregate. So I do really believe it's a combination of nutrition. I love Pilates. I think Pilates is great for balance and muscle strength, but everybody's body is different. It's like a car. If you have a classic car that's and every year at Barrett Jackson, these cars go for millions of dollars, but the ones that are running is because the owners give them TLC. And so everybody's body is constructed differently. Your brain chemistry is different. Your metabolism is different. So it's really a matter of working with healthcare professionals and trainers who don't have a one size fits all approach to healthcare, and then communicating with them and saying, all right, this is the area that I want to work on. What can I do? So my trainers happen to be trainers who also specialize in bodybuilding. And I said to them, I don't want to be a bodybuilder. And what was interesting, Abby said to me, you are a bodybuilder, you're just not competing. So I thought that was a really great quote, is
Okay.
you have to look at your body as an entity, including your brain, and saying, all right, how do I, if I'm looking at it like a classic car, how is my carburetor functioning? How are my brakes functioning? And getting medical care and finding the right doctors who don't adopt a one size fits all approach to healthcare. Because I think the doctors are also struggling. They don't know how to keep people healthy from 50s up to 100. It's new for them too.
Yeah, that's true. I think the healthcare system is geared even now. We'll be discussing this later. There's medicine 1.0, medicine 2.0, and then there's going to be medicine 3.0. Medicine 2.0 is about, which we are now, is, you're sick, we'll give you drugs to fix you, but we don't do anything to avoid you getting sick. And in this case, you get people coming in that are, okay, if you're 57 and you're a woman, and you have a calcium problem. Oh yeah, here we'll give you these osteoporosis drugs, and good luck. Call us again later. Hey, eat more cheese. But it's not. It has to be. So to me, what I find inspiring, and I hope that people will find that inspiring, is about what you're saying, is that th- this is not the end at all. This is actually the beginning of a brand new phase where you have the time finally to exercise when you want, to buy the right foods, well, the time and the money, to go to the farmer's market every day if that's what you wanted to do. And I think I like that you're saying this, because people will hopefully that listen to you will, you're not going to influence 100% of the people, but if you influence 28, 30, 35, it's huge. And then it just kind of builds on itself, because people will say, "Oh, you look great. What have you done?" Well, my diet, my exercise, So
And the thing I think I underestimated when I was building my career, kind of coming full circle back to the 70s and 80s when I was like that go-go, big shoulder pad woman, I was living in a constant state of stress. I was afraid that I was going to lose my job. I was afraid that the deck wasn't going to be done in time to present to the CEO. I was afraid that my train was going to be late and I was going to miss that important meeting. And I think that one of the things that we can very much control is our stress level. And this is where I do think AI and technology can come into play, that if we can use technology to find easier, simpler ways of getting things done, then our stress level goes down. And I learned the hard way. Last year, I took on a big marketing consulting engagement very high pressure role. I was stressed all the time. I couldn't get to the gym on a regular basis, or I didn't get to the gym on a regular basis. I have to take accountability for my choices. And I saw the impact it had on my body. And, what you just said before, Guy, in terms of finding those doctors and those healthcare workers that are willing to experiment along with you, and for us as humans to take control over our own care. And one of the things that's going on right now among women over 50 is, I think that, or over 40, I think it's great that people are talking publicly about the impact of menopause, but I worry about it because I'm somebody who's on the other side. I'm postmenopausal and I
Yeah.
feel great. And honestly, I think I'm better equipped to be a fractional CMO now than I was 20 years ago because I have that perspective. My brain is not foggy. That is the one thing I worry about with all this menopause talk is men don't walk around talking about their prostates.
Yeah.
So if women are really serious about having big careers up until their 60s, 70s, by constantly beating the drum and saying, oh, our brains are foggy and, we have night sweats, we don't get a good night's sleep and yada, yada, are men who are hiring or funding those companies going to say, I don't want to invest in her because she's foggy. The same way back when I was you can't win. When I was in my 20s, I was flaky. When I was in my 30s, I was getting married and worrying about my kids. When I was in my 40s, I was a distracted housewife. I was in my 50s, I had aged out. And now, I'm in my
Yeah.
60s. It's actually my Renaissance era. So
Yeah.
I think any company would be lucky to have me on a board or as a CMO. But there still is this, oh, she's a woman over 65. She should be playing pickleball and cooking. But just as an aside, I have found I do have this very, very wide domestic streak. I like to bake and cook and knit. And I found that in addition to my badass techie stuff, my domestic arts have actually contributed to reducing my stress level. Knitting has the same impact on the human body as yoga. And you mentioned eating dairy. My favorite new recipe is cottage cheese and protein powder in a blender, and then you refrigerate it, and it actually tastes as close to chocolate mousse as anything I've eaten. And it's hopefully helping to mend my osteopenia in my bones. So it's a win, win,
That's
win,
great.
win, win.
So to me, these are the kind of great things that's why I really enjoy your show, and I hope people will listen to it all the time. You said two things that I wanted to just focus on. Uh, like if you go on Reddit and you go on the menopause section, it's like one big bitching session.
Oh,
Okay,
for
and it
sure.
ranges from and then it becomes this defensive anti-world, of course, anti-man as well. I can't stand how my husband smells anymore. I don't want to touch him, so on and so forth. Just imagine if instead of that attitude, we had your attitude, which is let's take this thing straight on, let's fight it, let's do the hormone replacement therapy, let's exercise, let's make it a renaissance rather than an ending. And society, has to follow us because we're going to be the ones that fix ourselves, not go on Reddit and complain about it.
Right, exactly. And there are not, as you said earlier, there are naturopathic solutions. And I'm not talking about, going down to Peru and dropping ayahuasca. I mean, if you want to do that, you do you. But I read constantly about innovations in the aging space and longevity space. And that is what I call it. I don't talk about the M word. And not that we shouldn't have those conversations, but to your point, Guy, women are only shooting themselves in the foot when they get together and they have these men bashing hen parties where they complain about their night sweats. And it's important that we talk about it, but we should talk about it with an eye toward finding solution, because otherwise we're feeding into that stereotype of old cranky women. And I will never, I know when we were talking about the podcast, you're like, keep it positive. I'm like, absolutely. I will keep it real, because menopause is real and it does suck. But I'm like, my philosophy has always been, okay, this sucks. What am I going to do about it? And that's where I think my corporate background really has been helpful in all aspects of my life. Because when I worked at Citibank and I was reporting to big deal executives, I couldn't walk into a meeting and say, oh, I don't feel well today. I have cramps. I was
Yeah.
like, all right, I have cramps. I'm going to figure out how to medicate. I'm going to get a good night's sleep and I'm going to go in there and kick ass, because failure is not an option.
And Nancy was really important for someone like me who really cares about these issues. I have a mom and sisters and so on. Um, it can't come from male medical community. It can't come from anything that's guy driven. It has to be people like you. It has to be women, or someone like me has empathy. But even then, you don't want to. It's so that your work on that, and you and many other people, is crucial, crucial, crucial. So
Empathy and funding, Guy, that is the reality, that if a woman comes to a male VC and says, I have this product or this service or this business idea, like I would love to see Meno clinics the same way we see. I mean, they're starting to crop up, but in Arizona, I know there are a lot of men's health clinics where they do HRT. The women's clinics tend to focus more on Botox and GLP-1 inhibitors as opposed to some of the naturopathic solutions. And I think when Eastern and Western medicine come closer together, that will be when we really have some of these great solutions for longevity.
that again,
And
and
if
that's
and if
another.
men want women to remain sexually active and upbeat, they need to like put some skin in the game, in terms of
So to
funding
speak.
some of these innovations.
Yeah, yes, I 100% agree with this. I think it's one of these things where everybody wins, and we don't need necessarily to talk about it. And then it's like this episode. I think we've come up with what, 7 business plans for people already. Hopefully
Exactly.
someone is listening and they're gonna take advantage. One last question, because I know you need to leave. You mentioned AI, and when people my age, when we hear about AI, and of course I'm a venture capitalist, and people want to know what's going to happen with AI all the time because they think I'm an expert, but I'm not, because AI is so complex to how do we make how do we demystify AI for people of our generation? Of course, the women, which is your audience, but also I know that you, by the way, I predict your audience at some point is going to be, if not 50-50, probably 55-45 men,
Yeah.
because of the
I mean,
way.
that's what I'm seeing in my analytics, that I have
Yeah,
a lot of male listeners and subscribers, and I also have a lot of younger listeners and subscribers, because even people in their 20s and 30s want to know how they can live long, active lives and still
yeah.
be, because everybody's going to age. It's inevitable. But I wrote a book about AI back in 2017, before it really started to boom. And realized that throughout my life, I've seen all of these technology innovations that have ultimately made my life easier. So when I want to find a shoe repair place near me, I don't have to look through the yellow pages. I just Google on my phone. Um, I no longer have to use a manual typewriter and type over my mistakes. I use Grammarly and spell check. So if you look back at all of the technology innovations that made our lives easier and freed up our time to do other things, I look at AI as just the next natural evolution of that. So instead of paying an intern to research facts about retail business, I can now just ask Google and I get an index of articles, and then I go back in and I fact check. I always double check Grammarly to make sure it's not suggesting that I write something that doesn't sound like my voice. But I do think that, especially as we get older, time is limited. And how can you use AI to simplify tasks that otherwise would take you a lot of time? Or help make you more creative. I always wanted to be an artist, but I had no artistic talent. But now with Canva, I can cut and paste. It's like high-tech color forms, and I can remove the background of my images. So rather than saying, oh, AI, it's scary, it's going to take away jobs, is to look at it from the perspective of, well, what jobs will be in demand in the new AI powered world? And how can I learn to do some of those things? And I would actually argue that people over 50 may end up ultimately being the best prompters, which is a skill. It's a no code skill to ask the AI to create something or do something, because we grew up with the Dewey Decimal System and had to research everything
Yeah.
manually. So
Yeah.
we understand how to craft queries that will ultimately get the AI to do what we need it to do. So as I always say, the AI is a tool, but we are still the robot overlords. So at the show that I was just at, there were machines that cleaned the floor of restaurants, made cocktails, served food. Um, and
Wow.
you say, all right, well, if these machines are doing all that stuff, then the people who work in bars and restaurants can really begin to focus on human customer service. So, what could be better than taking away all of these mundane tasks that companies are having trouble finding people to do them anyway? So, let's just get a bot to do it, and then our people can really be as human as they could possibly be.
Yep. That, yeah, and then you focus on the hospitality part of things rather than on some of the mundane things. So that's great, and I encourage you to do more AI things for your audience. So in conclusion, um, yeah, this is going to sound like a interview question,
Where do I see
job,
myself in 5 years?
job interview, but I'm interviewing on behalf of your future huge audience. Where do you see yourself in 1 year? Where do you see yourself in 5 years with regards to the business that you've just started?
Well, again, kind of going back to marketing 101, the first step is build a solid brand that people need and want. Then it's build awareness. Then it's get engagement, building a community that really cares about you, and then monetize. When I first started my business 22 years ago, my mantra was imagine, focus, buzz, profit. And a lot of people focus on the buzz first. Oh, I've got to get a podcast. I've got to, you know, get some media interviews. I actually followed my own process. So I imagined myself becoming a late life influencer, or quinfluencer, as I call it, because it's a quality influencer. So that's, and having products and services that are monetizable. So that was my imagine. My focus was building out my website, which is nancyaf.com, or nancyashenker.com goes to that website. I've been sitting on that URL for easily 20 years. And it's like,
Okay.
finally, I could do something with it. The buzz is what we're doing now, is just building awareness. And then the profit will come in a year, 3 years at most, where CPG companies will engage me to promote their products and services. I still have my marketing company. I'm a storyteller. My business has not dried up yet. Brands will hire me to take complex data, using AI, turn it into compelling stories that people want to read or watch. So, yeah, I'm just getting started. I've got
That's
another
great.
30 good years left at least.
That's great. I definitely am one of the followers, and I'm always curious about your topics. And when they come up, I pay attention, and
Yeah,
I
you're
love
my
that.
ultimate fanboy, Guy. Thank you. I need a million more like you. So hopefully your friends and coworkers will listen and go, oh, gotta follow that crazy chick on nancyaf.com.
He's a quintfluencer.
Influencer. Right.
That's a new
Well,
word.
as I said, I have so many years of wisdom and experience and business sense where it's like, all right, I put all this time in. So now I'm going to finally cash out at the age of, hopefully, at the age of 69, 70. I think my Renaissance years are ahead of me.
That's great. Positive message. Sobering in certain ways about the lack of business focus on a very important segment, which I think we can address as well. And thank you so much. It's been for me incredibly edifying, and it's taught me a lot just
Thank you,
in
Guy.
40 minutes here. And good luck, and we'll stay in touch.
All right, terrific. Thanks, Guy.